Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse, and today we have an update about some of the migratory birds that are coming through the area, including some that are kind of rare. So it's always fun this time of the year to see what is coming through and where. As always, we love to know what kind of things you're seeing. If you have any sightings, you can put those in the comments. If you have any questions, throw those in there too. Or you can always just say hi. We love to see who is on. First of all, we had our first telescope night of the year the other night on Wednesday. It's a beautiful, beautiful night. It was very nice out. We had several different telescopes lined up. I think we counted 8 or 9 different telescopes, which was really, really cool. Some people brought their own. So we got those all set up. We had a pretty good turnout of people, and we saw some different things. We got to see the moon. Before it got too dark, we were able to watch the moon for a while. Actually, throughout the evening, we were able to watch the moon, see the craters of the moon. That was really neat. And then as it got later into the evening, around 9:30 or so, we got to see Saturn. Now, this is a really bad photo of it. I actually took this through one of the telescopes with my cell phone, so it's not very clear. It doesn't really reflect what you see through the scope very well, but we were able to see Saturn and the rings of Saturn, which was really, really cool. And also throughout the night, we were hearing a screech owl giving its call. So we had a really great night, telescope night the other evening, and we'll be doing another one next month. So be on the lookout for that date. As far as my personal sightings, I had this visitor in my front yard yesterday. I noticed it when I went to the mailbox. This giant spider had taken over my front porch. And this is called a crowned orb weaver. It's got this really distinctive pattern. This is the female. She's quite large, but she's got this almost like a cross kind of pattern on her body. And I've seen one of these before last year around this time in the fall out in the woods, but this one was right in front of my house. So I thought that was pretty cool. Very beautiful spider, very large spider. It's kind of hard to tell how big it is, but I would say it's at least 1.5 inches or so long. So big spider. Didn't expect to see that, but there she was. We've been talking about migration because it is fall migration time, and we've talked a little bit about waterfowl. There will be waterfowl coming in, but then there's been some other interesting things that are passing through our area and probably where you are too. Over the past week or so, even within the past couple days, there's been some different birds seen out by Braddock Bay. If you are in the Western New York area, you're probably familiar with that. It's a very popular migratory stopover site for lots of different birds, including a red knot. This is a red knot here. It's a type of shorebird, and it is not very common here at all. It's a rarity to see it, although I would maybe say once a year or so one does show up. This is its non-breeding plumage, so it doesn't have any of the reddish color on it that gives it its name. But there has been a sighting of a red knot in the area, and it's been here for about a week or so over at the Braddock Bay area, as well as a Forster's tern. So these two birds you can still see if you are in the Western New York area. A couple interesting birds there. And a few days ago, there was also a glossy ibis. I believe it was last year we had some spotted out at Montezuma at the wildlife refuge out there. But there was one spotted out by Braddock Bay just within the past week. And then there's lots of great egrets. If you are by any kind of body of water where you would normally see a heron, if you see a large white bird, that's going to be a great egret. And we are in their migratory range in the fall. They kind of disperse and are found throughout the area. So you tend to see them more in fall than you would in the spring. But there's been a lot of those. I've been seeing them all over the place, including even those little ponds by the mall, or if you're going to a shopping center, and sometimes there's those little dugout ponds. People have been seeing them there. So keep your eyes out this weekend for some great egret, and they'll continue to be around for the next, probably 3 weeks or so. You might still see some. And then warblers. Warblers can be tough in the fall because the males don't have that really bright, striking plumage like they do in the spring. But people are seeing lots of warblers around the area. A whole bunch of different types, but I figured I'd share the ones that have been spotted most often over the past week or so. Common yellowthroat. I had one of these in my backyard within the past week, so I thought that was pretty cool. People are seeing a good amount of black-throated green warblers, magnolia warbler, and so these are the fall and non-breeding plumages here of these birds. So they'll look different in the spring, but this is what they're looking like now. American redstart, there's been a lot of those reported, and bay-breasted warbler as well. This is just a few of them. There's been way more spotted, but these are the ones that have most commonly been spotted. Here's the black pole warbler, another type of warbler passing through on their way down to Central and South America. They've got a long flight ahead of them. Another bird that's been seen over by the Braddock Bay area are American pipit in the thrush family. They look like a robin. There's been a few of them spotted as well. Another bird to be on the lookout for, even in your backyard, are ruby crown kinglets. There's been quite a few of those reported. Golden crown kinglets as well, but the ruby crowns have been reported in larger numbers. You can't always see that red crown on the top of their head unless it's flared out, but keep an eye out for them even in your backyard. Not that many reports of orioles persisting. There are some, but for most people, the orioles have passed on through and they are going down south until the spring. We'll start to see them again early May. We'll start to get lots of reports of orioles coming back to the area, but right now they are on their way back down south, and this is where they spend the winter, in that section that is marked in blue. So they'll go down to Florida, Mexico, Central America, and even the northern tip of South America, Cuba. So they are on their way for the rest of the season. But hummingbirds, people are still reporting some hummingbirds and will throughout the rest of the month. We'll hear reports of hummingbirds as they are migrating through the area. Anytime they stop and find a food source, that's always great for them. So they will stop at flowers, they'll stop at hummingbird feeders, and people are still reporting them. And they're actually reporting the hummingbirds coming to feeders more so now than they were in the spring. So it makes sense. They are, they're getting ready and in the process of migrating and traveling miles and miles and miles. So they need a lot of fuel. So any kind of food source they can find is great. And that includes hummingbird feeders. So make sure that those feeders have fresh nectar in them. If you've been keeping them out all season, don't be surprised if you're seeing more hummingbirds right now than you were in the spring and even in the summer. White-crowned sparrow. There's been a lot of white-crowned sparrow reported over the last few days. So look underneath your feeders for them. They're pretty large gray sparrow with that really striking black and white striping on their head. And as we get even more into the fall, they'll become more and more common, but lots of them have been reported. And then white-throated sparrow is another bird to be on the lookout for underneath your feeders, especially. They look kind of similar to the white-crowned sparrow, but they're more brown in color. Most of them have a bright white patch underneath their throat, which is pretty striking. And you can see that yellow between their bill and their eye. So that is the white-throated sparrow. And they're starting to fizzle. Not that we had a huge showing of the monarch butterflies this year, but they are on their own migration going down south for the winter. And we're just about done with our peak, or in our area of the peak of monarch migration. I think around the 11th through 15th or 9th through 15th, something like that, is the peak migratory dates for monarch butterflies in our area in Western New York. But that changes depending on where you are. But just like the hummingbirds, don't be surprised if you see some that are filtering throughout the rest of the month. And they will go down to central Mexico, where they will spend the whole winter, and then they will begin that migration back up north come March, April or so. You might still see caterpillars too, some kind of late season caterpillars munching on milkweed. So don't be surprised if you see some really big caterpillars. Probably won't see the little first, second, third instars anymore at this point, but there are still some caterpillars out there, including this type of caterpillar, black swallowtail caterpillars. This photo was sent in by Karen, who had some tiny eastern black swallowtail caterpillars on her dill plants. And as they grow, they look quite different. We talked about them a bit on Tuesday. Really beautiful looking caterpillar as they grow. So check your herbs, because not only do they eat dill and fennel, they'll also go after parsley, or if you have Queen Anne's lace around, those are all host plants for this black swallowtail butterfly. And then I mentioned, and we'll keep seeing these, the woolly bear caterpillars. As we are in the fall season, they are known to just crawl through the grasses. And so don't be surprised if you start seeing them. And I've still been seeing some American oil beetles, which are a type of blister beetle. So different insects are out there as well. Even in the fall, and as it gets cooler, we'll still see different birds and insects coming through. So that is everything I have for you guys today. It looks like there's a few comments here. Marilyn is on it. She says, good morning. I have many feeders on my poles in my backyard and usually have all kinds of birds, but the last week or so, we have hardly had any birds. Are any of you out there experiencing this as well? We've heard some people have this kind of issue. Usually the number one reason, if you have birds consistently and then all of a sudden they disappear, normally that has something to do with some kind of a predator nearby, most likely some kind of bird of prey. So be on the lookout to see if there's anything kind of hanging around your feeders. As the temperature drops, I'm not sure where you live, but as the temperature drops, we get more and more reports of birds like Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk starting to hang out around feeders, and those birds do not want anything, the songbirds don't want anything to do with those hawks, because they do go after birds. So that's going to be probably your number one reason why you won't see any birds. Another reason could be if your feeders are dirty. You can always take a look at your feeders, make sure there's no mold or anything like that. And as long as the feeders are clean and the seed is fresh, you're doing everything right. There's probably a predator nearby. So keep an eye out, especially for those Cooper's hawks. They're the number one hawk that really is in backyards going after birds. But then you might also see things like red-tailed hawks or sharp-shinned hawks. Red-tailed hawks are going to go after more things like snakes and squirrels and chipmunks and things like that, more mammals. But in a pinch, even if they're around, the songbirds don't want anything to do with them. Randy's on says, good morning. Neighbor and myself were wondering about the local bats in the neighborhood. We haven't seen any and wondered if it's because of the Canadian wildfire earlier in the year. Also, do they even migrate? Very good questions. The bats, so bats do migrate. So they don't migrate all the way down to, say, Mexico or anything like that, but they will migrate further down into the state or into Pennsylvania. And most of them will spend the winter in large cave systems or abandoned mines. If there's any abandoned mines around you, that might be where you can find bats in the winter time. So they do migrate, and they'll spend the winter all together in some kind of cave system usually. Other bats, like tree bats that don't hang out in large groups, some of them will migrate, some of them will stay for the winter, but kind of hang out in trees and just hibernate in the trees, hanging off of trees, or wedged in between bark or under barks of the bark of trees. As far as the lack of bats, it sounds like there's been a lack of bats in your area. Probably doesn't have anything to do with the Canadian wildfire so much that was earlier in the year. Probably has more to do with just their populations are in decline in general. They have been, bats have been hit really hard with something called white nose syndrome, and that's caused a lot of death as far as bat populations go. So they are in some pretty big declines in general. So that could be why you're not seeing any, unfortunately. So you can always put out bat houses are a great way to attract bats to your backyard or your space. They can be kind of tricky to put up because they do need to be put up high, about 15 feet up in the air on a pole or on the side of a house. You want it in a place that gets a lot of sun because they do like it hot inside the house. So it can be kind of tricky to put up a bat house if you don't have the right specs. But if you do, that's a fabulous thing that you can do to help promote bat populations. They eat lots of insects. They're really great mosquito control. So definitely consider that if you have the opportunity to. Ed is on and says, love those huge orb weaver spiders. Yeah, and this one was huge. We'll go back to it. The color pattern on their backs reminds me of an African tribal mask. Also, it seems our regular hummers have gone, but we did see a female yesterday. I suspect it was a migrant. Yes, probably. Yeah, probably because if you had some individuals that were coming regularly throughout the season, they've probably started their migration south. And what we're seeing now is more of the migrants that were further north coming through as they make their migration down south. But yeah, some big orb weaver spiders out there. I'll have to see if I can find my photos from last year. When there was one day I saw a whole bunch all on the same day, a few different types, and they were all quite large, and it can be a little jarring if you come right up to one and don't see it until they're right in front of you. Steel Monkey says yes, in a response to Marilyn's question about not seeing many birds at her feeders. Steel Monkey says, yes, I'm noticing the same thing. Not as many birds at my feeders. It's been quiet. So I would also check for birds of prey. We've heard a couple of customers say the same thing this past week. Not so many birds at their feeders. And it could have something to do with this time of the year. A lot of plants are depending on the species, the plants are no longer in bloom and they're going to seed. So there's a lot of natural food out there for the birds. They might be picking the seeds off of, coneflower, black-eyed Susans are a good example of a food source for things like goldfinch and chickadees. So it could just be there's a lot of natural food out there too at the moment. And so I would check that, but also check to see if you have a bird of prey in the area. That could very well be. Vicki is on. She says, greetings, Liz. I am keeping an eye on the migrating birds here in Raleigh. Okay, so you might still have some orioles passing through. So you might be seeing some of the orioles that were up here passing through the area as they go through the eastern U.S. down to Mexico for the winter. Let's see, Jen says, good morning. Yesterday morning, we had our first great blue heron visit our yard by the tree line. Stayed quite a while. That's pretty cool. Yeah, so great blue herons, every once in a while, they are reported here in the winter. Sometimes, there are some that are here, even if there's snow on the ground, if they can find some open water. Sometimes they can hang out for a while, but in general, they're going to go a little bit further south for the winter too. So they've been moving around a little bit, seem like those great egrets. So you might see some movement there of those birds as well. It's really cool to have one in your backyard, though. It's not a very common backyard bird unless you have some kind of a water feature. Steel Monkey, who is talking about not seeing as many birds at their feeders, said, I'm going to try and wash out my feeders. Maybe that's it. Thanks. Yeah, please keep us posted. It looks like that's everybody's comments and questions for the day. Oh, there's one more. Randy says, been hearing Canadian geese flying overhead. Are they migrating already? Yeah, they migrate too. There's populations of Canada geese that migrate. There's some that don't migrate and will just stay in the area all winter. But I've been hearing that too. And yep, they're on the move, so they are moving around too. And the migratory population will go south a little bit further for the winter. So I think that's everybody's comments and questions. We'll be back on Tuesday with another broadcast. And until then, have a great weekend. Let us know what kind of things you are seeing coming through your yard. Send us in your photos. We love to see your pictures all the time, and we'll share those next time. And until then, have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.